everybody. I'm Vicky. I'm Luz.
I'm Jillian.
Gina.
I'm Heather.
Megan.
Welcome back to another episode of Powerful Women of Havre County.
Wow. Yes, wow. Well, thank you for joining the podcast and listening to us. I think we're going to start today's podcast with a discussion about what we've experienced as a country, as a county. You know, on the local and national level, there has been some significant changes that will, if they haven't already, will affect all of our lives. All of our lives. And this is not an exaggeration. For example, we have seen already the firing of what we call career, longtime civil servants at all levels of federal government, which means in many places, the government has come to a screeching halt. And a lot of the things, for example, services, the VA has put a hiring freeze for those who are veterans or who have families who have served our country. There have been significant changes, and there is a lot of fear from folks who work in that particular agency. So anywhere from the State Department to the Department of Justice, where I used to work, there is this sense of fear and confusion. Because while there have been edicts issued or executive orders handed down, there really has not been a plan. People are in the dark. So from that, we can start to talk as a community here about some of the things that will affect us, regardless of our, where we come from, our political leanings, etc. So I just want to throw out for discussion to my colleagues, my dear friends here. Let's talk about, for example, education. What has happened in the last 5 days that affect not just public school K through 12 education, but for those of us like me who are, who have children who are preparing to apply to college, what has happened in that realm too, and how that will affect all of us, really. For example, with the public school education, we know now that there is a movement to rid the federal government of the Department of Education. And while that may not mean very much to us, who cares about the Department of Education? We should care, because if you have a child who needs special assistance, educational support, if you live in a school that's a Title I school, which is a school that serves some communities that are lower income, there are millions and millions of dollars in funding that will disappear. And our schools are already in need for additional funds, not less. So we may see cases where school systems will collapse. And I'm not being I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to be dramatic here.
Not at all.
Any thoughts on that? I know some of you work or have very strong relations with the school board. Any thoughts, any fears?
Well, my son has a 504 plan, and, I definitely worry with the possible dismantling of the Department of Education, how that will affect him. Luckily, it's a very mild plan. It's more of like reminders and all of that. But I fear as he gets older, he may transition into an IEP or something that requires more hands-on. And what will that look like? And one of the biggest things when I discuss it with people, well, it's going to be up to the states. Yes, we're very lucky to live in Maryland, but what about the kids in Louisiana? What about the kids in Mississippi that have some of the lowest graduation rates in the entire country? Or one of the poorest states, have the fewest teachers with the fewest schools. I mean, there are kids who travel miles just to get to a school. Dismantling the Department of Education for these type of states is going to have massive repercussions. We're going to see people dropping out in 5th grade, just like they did 100 years ago, so that way they can go to work instead of having to walk to school. because there's no funding for school buses to go out that far. So
I would say there's even a further impact that people aren't thinking about, which is beyond our individual children on our students who are already out there, and the issues of equity from state to state that you just pointed out, which is so very valuable. Let's look long term. Let's look at that workforce. Those kids who are dropping out in 5th grade, they're not going to have the skills. We have people across the spectrum who talk about the need for America to be competitive internationally in terms of science, in terms of technology, in terms of the workforce. How are we going to get that skilled, educated, smart workforce if we don't start educating our kids in the public schools? Because not everybody's going to a private school. And even if we only take the private schools, how much intelligence and innovation are we leaving on the table by not letting those kids who don't have a socioeconomic advantage explore their gifts? If you just want to be pure capitalist about it, you're losing out on your workforce. You're missing people to exploit. Why would you do that? It's not a smart long-term investment from any kind of consideration, economic, moral, just values. We're not investing in our kids. We're not investing in our future. The only thing that happens is that we lose by not investing in education.
One of the things that the county executive talked about in his state of the county was that this area he wants to see as a high-tech area. So if that's the case, long term, like you're saying, Gina, what does that mean? Where are those people going to come from? Are we looking for more people to move into Harford County? Which sometimes it doesn't seem like, people that are here want other people to come in. But how are we going to grow our own, here in the county to take those types of positions? It has to start in the public schools.
Absolutely. And that's a great point, because if we don't bring new people in, if we do want to close up shop, close the borders, if we want to make America a more insular country, we need to invest even more in America. And cutting the Department of Education is a great way not to do that. It's literally doing the exact opposite of what's being said as an end goal. So I think, Luce, you're completely right. The long-term ramifications are so broad and have such an impact. Here in Harford, we've got APG, we've got this stated desire to be a tech hub. How do we do that if our kids don't have all of the education opportunities that they need to grow those?
I just want to say that I think I've become a bit of a conspiracy theorist. And I say that because in all that you're explaining, it is common sense that the actions don't match the words.
yeah.
So my thought process is, in order for this to align with the other policies that we're all against, that they're putting in place, if you're having an issue with the immigration policy and you're deporting all of these people, guess what? You're going to need people to replace those workers. So now what do you do? Because someone who's highly educated is not going to want to go into those positions, right? So you still have to develop a workforce. I say develop and, use the term loosely, but you still have to develop a workforce to fit back into those empty spaces. So dismantling the education system is a good way to do that, because now you have people who are not able to get the jobs that, people who are grandfathered in and have money can get.
I love that point. And just to add on to that, there are states, including, for example, Arkansas, that about 6 or so months ago adopted laws that would allow children
Yes.
to quit school and
work.
So there are states in parts of, the poorest areas, West Virginia, Arkansas, where you're asking, where will that uneducated, and I hate to use that term, but where will that workforce to supplant, to replace folks that are going to be deported and disappeared in some cases, because we don't know what's happening with some of the folks that are being literally picked up from the street. That is happening as we speak. Where are we going to get the people to replace them? Well, this has all been thought out carefully. Now we are allowing people not to send their children to school. There used to be truancy laws, not in certain states anymore. And, I think in terms of what Gina brought up, I want to sort of take that further, and what Megan brought up in, the inequity among the states, right? There are some states, and we're very lucky to live in Maryland
Very.
because, I feel very good about our future as a Marylander who's lived here most of, her adult life. I think that we can withstand, and this goes towards solutions, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but our state can withstand a lot of the cuts to our education because we are going to make it work. I believe in our state government and how we can move forward. But not every state is like Maryland and prioritizes, for example, education or healthcare. That's another issue that I think we really need to be vigilant about. Did you know, in addition to the huge cuts in funding and the freezing of all research into cancer,
Yes.
into diseases, the lack of funding for preparation, if we have an avian flu outbreak or any of these other pandemic like things. Did you know that 2 days ago there was an executive order that was signed that directly contradicted what this administration had promised? They promised that
Yes.
access to health care for women was going to be left up to the states. The federal government would not interfere. Well, 2 days ago, there was an executive order that was signed that said, if you don't want women to access certain places that provide health care, you can go and protest. You can harass. You can intimidate. They have literally brought back the days where you can shoot people who are providing health care to women if you don't like it. And given what's recently happened, when folks have been pardoned for violent protests, you have to think about what that will do to all of us as women, to those of us who have daughters. Will we feel safe accessing healthcare? So I'd love to hear about your thoughts with respect to that.
Well, my thoughts. To give a little bit of context, I did an internship this past semester with Planned Parenthood. That organization, even prior to my internship, was very near and dear to my heart. It helped me in several cases where I needed emergency care, and it really has been so important to have. I cannot imagine going into work every day, or just a female seeking care, or even a male seeking care. There was only one time when I went into my internship where there was a man feeding the birds outside, handing out pamphlets about adoption. And I'm like, sir, I'm just here to get my paycheck. Leave me alone. And luckily that was it. That was the only time I ever encountered any type of protester. Not only are people now allowed to go and try to be violent, that is now going to reduce the amount of people who feel safe enough to go and get the care that they need. Planned Parenthood is not just abortions, it is STD and STIs, it's HIV, it's vasectomies, it's tube litigations, it's birth control, it is education, and that was part of what I did. I wasn't in the clinic on a regular basis. I was in high schools giving them comprehensive sex education and offering them support and services if they had never been to the gynecologist, but they're sexually active. You need to have these organizations for more than just abortions. And it just sickens me that it is now allowed for people to just go and... I remember being younger and hearing about bombings of Planned Parenthoods.
I'm old.
So to revert back to that is ridiculous, because Planned Parenthood is not just for females. It is for anybody who needs care.
Planned Parenthood is probably, has in the past and hopefully will continue to be one of the most important and largest providers of health care for women. Abortion is the smallest part of what they do. Some clinics do not perform abortions that are Planned Parenthood clinics. What they do is save lives, particularly with their cancer screenings. For many years, I chose Planned Parenthood as my healthcare provider because I had the privilege of being able to do that and to give that money back to that clinic by taking my health care there. But I can tell you, I'm old. I have been on the other side of those screaming people. My husband and I actually, one of our first dates, there's a very amusing story on that because there was an abortion protest across the street and I was myself and got highly offended. And poor Phil was like, I get it. I'm like, oh no, that's not going to stand. I'm going to go. And he's like, I get it. And I'm like, I'm not going to, no, I'm like, look, and we're early on. I said, well, look, I don't care. If this isn't important to you, I need to know that. And that's fine. It doesn't have to be. But this matters to me. And the poor guy finally said, I'm just hungry. Can we eat first and then protest? And that's exactly what we did.
Get your food to go.
We ate fast and then we protested. But that's what that's what it's about. And that's what it's going to take from everybody. But it's vitally important.
You think about education a bit too, as both of you are speaking, how that's really what it comes down to, because so many things happened, and teenagers and young people in the moment, they talk to each other and they don't know things, and their parents don't share things. But it's like, how do you get the education out there? And I'll just go back to the actual topic of education for a second. I have to give a shout out to the union, HCEA, because they are educating the community on the budget, which hasn't been done before. And they saw that people don't understand what these numbers mean. And when our county executive says we don't have money, now they're really breaking it down. And they've had a couple of sessions. They're going to have some more virtually. That office is not huge, by the way.
Right.
So, that's the type of investment we're going to have to make in order for people to start understanding what these things really mean. And I love that you said Planned Parenthood isn't just abortions, because that's immediately what people think. And in fact, Gina, a lot of older people spout that. And
most of them do.
They know what it is.
Most of them do. I will also tell you that Planned Parenthood has been on the forefront of preventing AIDS. It's not just about sex. It's absolutely not about abortion. It is about preserving lives. And it's not just about women. It's about those young men, too.
And I'll tell you what, during my internship, we were based in high schools. I was at 2 different high schools, both of them, they were in the city. So Title I high schools. Yeah. These boys, the amount of education that I gave to boys who I thought maybe they would know what a period is.
Oh, no.
They would know how to put on a condom, because one of the first things that we learned during our training was you can't stop kids from having sex. They are at their most hormonal states in high school. No matter how much Bible thumping you do, no matter how much you tell them don't have sex, they're going to be out there having sex. What you can do is educate them on safe sex. Educate them on what's at risk if they do have sex. And the amount of misinformation that boys are spreading among themselves, but also the biases that they are putting on females, or that they have against females. I was blown away that when I asked who can catch an STD, in their mind, they thought only females could have STDs and males only got it from females.
Wow.
Interesting.
So
not a surprise.
Yeah,
Wow.
and then also the amount of females who didn't know that a UTI was not an STD. Sometimes UTIs just happen, yeast infections, BV, these very common things that if the breeze blows the wrong way, you could get it. Like, it has nothing to do with sex.
Your thong is too tight and
Your
it doesn't work.
You went to gym class, and when you got home, you didn't change.
Yeah.
You think of that. They don't shower after gym anymore.
Right.
So the amount of times that I'm sure they go home and fall asleep, and then all of a sudden, a day or two later, they're like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. What's going on? And then they have this stigma of, oh, you're dirty, you're stinky, you got this because you're a whore, whatever it is. When in reality, they just didn't change after going to the gym and getting sweaty. Like, it's the misinformation of it, which once again goes back to education. This is not something that these kids are getting comprehensively in public school. And Planned Parenthood is giving these services to these schools. And I would like to think that I helped a lot of these kids understand the comprehensive part of it and possibly preventing an STD or stigma or whatever it is.
And this gets back to what Liz started with, is that if we don't have a Department of Education with national standards, we are going to have no requirement for teaching specific things. Already, parents can opt out. One of the Midwestern states is currently, their Supreme Court has agreed to take up hearing whether or not they can fund religious schools through public dollars.
Indiana.
Yeah, Indiana.
That is correct.
So, I mean, and it's highly unlikely that religious school is going to put a huge emphasis on human sexuality and human health as part of their funding. And as parents, that's, I mean, how does that make, how does that make you feel as parents?
And males can get UTIs as well.
Oh,
Yes, they can.
Yes, they can.
They can also get breast cancer, and
Yes.
Planned Parenthood screens for that too.
Yep, if you've got nipples, you can get breast cancer pretty much.
Yep.
Like,
I think for me, number one, there's so much going on with everything with this new administration. As an immigrant, I am definitely feeling the side of, the immigration concerns, and it brings out all the hate from uneducated people. I was arguing actively on Facebook, which I need to stop doing, with someone today who should be better educated about these topics, who stated that these same illegal immigrants voted for these policies. And my head almost exploded, because I'm like, illegal immigrants,
Schrodinger's immigrant.
and I had to pay a ton for a citizenship to be able to vote. So yes, some people did vote against their best interest, but it's based on the lack of education. So that's one part of it. But for me,
illegal immigrants voted.
she said illegal immigrants voted
for
these policies.
A grown person said that.
So a grown person who ran for office. We're going to keep that moving. The next part of it is that
Civics.
for me,
Wow.
for me,
Also out of the
I was
curriculum.
15 when I had my first child. And one of the biggest things was, because I come from a West Indian background, there was no education shared. That's very taboo. So I didn't know anything about that. And I went through my pregnancy by myself, kind of. And when I had my child, I remember giving birth, and they prejudge you because you're young. I had already planned to breastfeed, and I had a Jamaican nurse. I'm Jamaican. She says, so I said, I want to breastfeed my kid. And I didn't have Planned Parenthood to educate me on, or anybody to educate me on my rights. And I remember they brought the baby in, and she would not latch. And I was so I was distraught because I just thought, I'm young, I'm stupid, I don't know what I'm doing. There was nobody there to support me. And then I saw milk coming out of her mouth, and I asked. And the nurse comes in and she says, that's because you stupid young people don't know what you're doing. Ooh. That's what she said. Come to find out, they gave my baby a bottle, which is why she wasn't latching. But for having 5 girl children who are almost all adults now, I have one that's 13, but everybody else is adults. I was so open with them about everything because I know that this country frowns on educating the women. Because what we don't want is for the women to be smarter. Mm-hmm. What is it that they said they were taking? They were removing so much of women's history from what we're going to be taught going forward. And that's scary because our young women need us to be there to support them. So to sit here and now remove that history or not discuss it, what they say now, they're not discussing the Tuskegee Airmen and the naval I'm like, what? This is a lot. And so I don't think that in this county specifically, we're going to feel it right away. Mm. But if you have a loved one or if you're a compassionate person, you just know, it's going to eventually spread. We are comfortable here, and our elections even are based because we are comfortable. If nothing is directly impacting you, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And so until it does directly impact us, if we were a sanctuary city, that would be it would be a totally different case. But again, what is it, 4% of the population here?
If that.
If that.
It seems. 2 things you've said that I take to heart, and we'll talk about immigration, I think, in closing, because there's lots to say, and we are going to talk about solutions, or at least what we can do individually to protect ourselves, our families, our loved ones, and to not bend the knee to injustice and immorality. So that's coming. But two things you said in terms of things are not affecting this county yet. We have a huge military base here, right?
Yes.
So the executive orders and the general edicts that have been flowing will significantly affect how that does business.
This is where I've been waiting to jump in. How do we get there? How do we get there? I actually heard someone asking a government official, how do you think that the work from home order, being rescinded is going to affect Harford County? Well, it's going to be great for Aberdeen. I don't think it's going to be great for Aberdeen. I think people are going to quit in droves. And when we had the base realignment and closure, we thought people were going to move here.
Yep.
A lot of people were like, I'm still going to
loved
maintain
that,
my
yeah.
residence in New Jersey
course.
and work remotely. Well, now that they can't work remotely, they're just going to quit.
Yes, they are. They are.
But also remember that a lot of people here too travel to Fort Meade. They travel to the Pentagon. They travel, to other places. And my father did that when he was in the Army. We got stationed here because of APG, but he got stationed at the Pentagon. So to think that, and at that time actually there really wasn't remote work. So for him to have to be on the road from family 5 days a week, just for what? Just to sit in an office? I mean, it's outside of this county. And I was going to say, are we saying that things aren't affecting this county? Or are we just used to certain things in this county? I go back to, knowing we saw on social media this guy who said, who was excited that he's 100% white. Like, I can't remember what the post was, but it was like, why would you even say something like that?
Meanwhile, I'm doing my family tree, please.
I was excited to see I was 10% Middle Eastern Jewish. I was
Really?
like,
Girl.
I know. Like, I knew I had a little something to
Well, I'm 1% Wales. I mean, but it's like people are so ignorant if they don't think that, you can, we all came together at some point. Why is that such a negative thing, and even also in this county talking about, we've been talking about DEI for years, right? So, but people don't really understand what that is. So I just feel like it's happened here. We're so used to it,
Talking about DEI, something really interesting that probably all of you can add to. I saw just today someone reminded the world that the first DEI recipients were Vietnam veterans because they were castigated and considered to be unhirable or traitors, and that was the first DEI benefit, was those veterans who came back. So it's great for the arrogant white people to think that DEI just means that those undeserving people of color won't get the jobs that my son should get. No, it may mean that you don't get the job that you think you should get because of your military service, and it is insane. Again, and I'm going to go back to my point at the beginning, which is how much talent are we cutting out because of the color of people's skins, because of the zip codes that they live in, because of the amount of money that their family has to put into those extracurriculars or that STEM camp or all of the rest of it? How much brilliant, thoughtful, innovative, creative are we just cutting out because we don't support this?
And don't forget accessibility.
Oh, that's a whole different topic.
So speaking of, we talk about DEI. The executive orders that have been issued have actually been issued on DEIA. So accessibility is squarely within the number of programs or any sort of initiatives that they're going to eliminate. Can you imagine going after people who are disabled or who need to access their work and use certain separate tools? And those are the things I don't think most people realize when they say, well, this really won't affect me. If you have a person who is disabled in your life, if you have a person who needs like you were saying, Megan, the 504 plans, the IEPs, all of those things are going to disappear, and it's going to affect a cross section.
And if you become disabled, or you have a
Yeah,
child who has Down
imagine.
syndrome, or we have the ARC, here locally, and they've been growing, but will that continue? And there's just so many things to consider that people are not because of their blind racism.
or you need access to healthcare. And just another thing about DEI initiatives, the biggest beneficiaries of DEI initiatives have been white women.
Oh, yes.
I think in terms of voting against self-interest, putting children aside, families, etc. As a woman who wants and who is in the workforce, who wants to, continue to work to help out my family, why would I vote against my own interest in terms of voting for policies that will completely, put a bullseye on my back just because people are going to say, well, was that woman hired because she's a woman? This zero-sum game that is driven, I think, and I'm going to get very political here, by white mediocre insecurity, male insecurity in
White
particular.
fragility.
White fragility.
Male fragility in particular is going to end up destroying us. So I'm going to shift now in terms of white male fragility. And boy, we can talk about conspiracies in terms of immigration, Jillian. But let's talk about immigration. I mentioned that in our county because I'm a proud former undocumented immigrant. I came to this country when I was 10 years old because my parents fled my native land because they were revolutionaries. They protested against the government and the then military regime that Ronald Reagan was propping up with U.S. money. So we literally came to this country because we had family here. Like most immigrants, we came here because we knew people here and we heard about the possibility of just settling down, making a life. Initially, we wanted to go home, but then you settle and you remain. And, 44 years later, since I arrived, here we are. So what I'm going to say, obviously, is colored by my experience. Former undocumented person who was in college when we took advantage of the there was an amnesty, they called it in 1986, 87. So that's how I became, I acquired my residency and eventually I became a U.S. citizen, right? And my goal was to serve this country working as a civil rights lawyer. And that's what I have been doing with my life. So this has colored the way I see things. As an immigrant, what I am observing, what I hear from, because I do work in children's rights and immigration, has truly broken my heart. You have places here in Maryland, specifically, but not in Havre County, where there are significant immigrant populations. And the people who want to cause harm, who want to, deport the quote-unquote illegals, I don't like that word, but who want to get rid of folks who don't have authority to be here. Those people are really targeting areas to be most cruel, to draw the most fear, and to punish officials who are and who have said that they are going to do what they can to protect the folks in their state. So I was just speaking with a former colleague who's now a teacher. She retired from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and now serves as an art teacher in Montgomery County. And she was telling me some really awful things. For example, on Friday, and she played a recording, there was an ICE car that parked at a bus stop where children were getting off from the bus. So what did the bus driver do?
Kept driving?
The bus driver did not open the door. And when he came up, he literally came up, she opened the door and said, do not come in unless you have a warrant. You need a judicial warrant to enter the bus because there are children that are my responsibility.
Right.
So if you don't have it, you can't come in. And then she shut the door, and the guy went away.
Yeah.
Wow.
He did not do
That
anything.
gives me chills.
Yeah, I just got a cold chill.
So, what do we do? You know, even though we are not seeing these things in our community, what can we do as people with morals, with empathy, with kindness?
I want to say we have
Yes.
seen the play on fear in our
Yes.
community very recently, all the way up to the national level, using a case here, preying on people's fear.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how to change that in Harford County.
Well, I think you talk to people, Heather, because you know I am from El Salvador. I know exactly to which case you're referring, and I certainly am not a, criminal killer.
Right.
So I think on a one-on-one basis, I mean, these are basic steps. If you talk to people who say, well, they're all criminals, they're all killers, you can say that's not true.
It's like combating the sheriff and the county executive, and that's
And you organize, right?
Yeah.
You start small, convincing, hearts and minds that what the sheriff is saying is a lie. That what politicians are saying, not just in this county, that they're lies, they're generalizations.
Yeah.
And, some people will listen, other people won't. But the key is, first, I think, to engage people. I pray for patience because sometimes I get very frustrated. It's like, these are things you should know.
Yeah.
But it's, it's engaging in those dialogues. It's showing up. There are folks like, like Jillian said, undocumented people cannot vote. Please, hear that out. If you learn one thing, and if you're running for political office and you don't know that, you have no business, engaging in that. Yes.
I think, though, you're raising something interesting, and I think my question and my challenge is, what can we do quickly? Because you're absolutely right that, education, all the rest of it, and my grandparents were first-generation citizens, and we lived in New Jersey, right next to Plainfield, New Jersey, which in 1968 burned as part of the riots from Dr. King's assassination, and we lived in South Plainfield. And that created a very, very bitter feeling for my grandparents. And my grandmother and my grandfather were racist when I was growing up. Point blank. I'm not hiding it. Which was a challenge. But by the end of their lives, my grandparents said, yeah, that was wrong. That wasn't the right thing. But we don't have 40 years to do this because people are in danger today. They're in danger tomorrow. The fear-mongering, Heather, that you pointed out is 1,000% correct. And it's easy. It's shorthand. Because I'll tell you, white people are easily scared. They have all of the rights, all of the privileges, and they're easily terrified. They're like, I don't know, they're like snow geese or something. It's just, it's ridiculous, but it's an effective tool. If you scare someone, they don't want to lose what's theirs.
Yeah.
And if you scare them and think that their kids aren't going to get it because your kids are getting it, they're even more scared. We know that's wrong. Many people know that's wrong. And we try, but it is the frustration factor that you brought out. And it's time. I mean, I did it with my grandparents, but it was a decades-long process of exposure and of calling them out and of screaming matches at the table. And how do we make that? How do we shorten that? How do we condense that so that we keep people safe?
I have a suggestion. So here's the thing. It's always going to be a long game. I don't think there's any short answer. But I think that we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable conversations. I am never about straying away from uncomfortable conversations. I like it.
Yeah, me too.
But that's one of those things because I remember like when I was running for office, literally knocking on doors and canvassing, and people had no idea what was going on in our community. Nothing. They didn't even know that there was an election. You know what I mean? So it's just basic education and being able to sustain your cool. And I know that a lot of conservatives, tend to lean on the Bible, you know, but they don't actually behave like they're leaning on the Bible. And I think that we need to lean on those kind of behaviors, you know. So it's easy to get upset and frustrated. Like you said, you get frustrated and you're like, I've told you 100 times undocumented immigrants can't vote. But until you can help them lead themselves to that, there's nothing more we can do. I have sat and had conversations with people and I'll just be like, but why? But why? Yeah. But and they got to figure out the answer. You know what I mean? Because so many times they don't see how it actually impacts them. So, for example, in my district, my district was heavily Republican, voted heavily Republican, you know, fine. I know where I live. But one of the things I realized is I can't expect them to look for change because they don't need anything changed. Right. We had a road that was damaged, and within a week, the road was repaired. And I was like, well, look at that. But, you know, Route 40 has been a jacked up mess forever because guess who lives down on that side? You know, it's not the same people. Yeah. And so our government has given us this system of creating the negative impacts and then expecting us to make the change instead of them.
An example of what you were talking about with the, like, your kids can't, my kids can't have it if your kids have it.
Right.
Right now at the Board of Education, they're talking about the Patriot Program.
Oh,
we don't teach civics in school. We let the kids do it through Patriot Program, which is voluntary and only if your PTA chooses to run that program. And so it's very unequitable across the county. Some schools don't do it at all. Some schools, when Braden was at Old Post Road, I was on the PTA, but no one had the capacity to rewrite the curriculum. So it was just repeating the same thing every year. It didn't build upon itself. So I guess the schools decided to integrate some of that into the curriculum so that it will be equitable across the board. But now we are going to have a big protest at the Board of Ed, it sounds like, because how dare we take away the Patriot Program?
Well, how about we just
but you're expanding it. You're not taking it away.
Right. We're including the stuff that you learn in the Patriot Program into their curriculum.
But they see it as you taking something away from my kid to give it to everybody's kid.
Wow.
I mean, several politicians and other leaders in this county said some things about it, but I don't think that they fully understood what was happening. So it was just a knee-jerk reaction.
They never do. That's why their reactions are so big and grandiose, because they never fully understand what it is that's happening.
Wow.
But the way you've explained it, can you reiterate for people who are listening? It's not taking from your kid. What is it doing?
It's giving a civics lesson to all children.
Access to all.
Yeah.
And building on the success, I think even more than that, the Patriot Program was so good that they want to expand it instead of taking it away.
Some schools are great at the Patriot Program, and other schools, they just do their best, or some schools just don't have the capacity. Not everybody has a PTA.
Of course.
So it's that was when I saw it, it just came into my head. Like we did our best at Old Post Road with the Patriot Program, but I've been to, you know, as Jacob said, Meadowvale and Havre Grace Elementary. They do a phenomenal job, but not everyone is getting that. And it's just, you know, you go up and to the Board of Ed and, you know, spout that we're not teaching our children these things, but then when we are, oh well, you're taking it away from my kid to give it to everybody else. And that's not.
How is giving it to everyone taking it away from your kid? I'm genuinely flummoxed.
Well, that's what you said, that the attitude is, you know.
That is the attitude.
We'll have to come back to that at the next.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we could talk about so many things all the time, but in conclusion, on this topic that we've had today, Luz, can you talk about things that, you know, so many folks are saying, what can I do? I need to do something, you know, and they feel like they want to mobilize, but maybe they don't have time or they don't have the resources or they're not sure. Can you talk about some things that you think people can do to seem like they're making a difference?
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up.
Yes.
So there are those things that, you know, folks have been doing on both the left and the right. Mobilizing, being seen, demanding things directly from politicians. For those folks who are not comfortable going out there, going to the school board meetings, going to the city council, writing to, you know, your congressional rep or your senator or at the state level, for those folks, you can donate to organizations that are currently on the ground, like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, like, the ACLU, like, the place where I work, which is called the Southern Poverty Law Center. Like, we have Raices, if you're interested specifically in immigrant rights issues. Casa de Maryland is local, and they're doing know your rights work. So they need funding, because this is the other thing. The federal government has they've immediately cut off, as early as Tuesday, they cut off the programs that paid for people like Catholic Charities to send in Know Your Rights teams to educate immigrants who are in detention or who were helping for free people filling out asylum applications, etc. So there won't be any more funding for the people who need it the most. So think of immigrant rights organizations that will need your support to supplant what has been taken from them in terms of federal, funding and federal support.
So can
That's
I
a start.
add,
Yes, please.
for the people who don't have the funds for that, I think social media is also another really powerful tool, sharing information about it. That is like the most basic, easiest way to start with us, is sharing ACLU website, sharing NAACP, and so on and so forth. Just factual information, sharing it when and where you can, whether it's on social media or just talking about it. So
Absolutely.
Great idea.
And I would add, people can share things from the Human Rights Campaign Fund. If you have anybody in your family who is LGBTQIA, they are under attack also. You can share information from Planned Parenthood or from other women's healthcare organizations. You can share SPLC's information. You can share ACLU's, NAACP. That is a great way to do it. And sometimes just you can join PFLAG. You can be, you can give free mom hugs, or you can just go up to somebody whose family may be from another country and say thank you. We don't have to be hopeless.
Well, we have local organizations too that are doing work. And, people can share on the national level and the state level, but don't forget about your local folks. Who are
Absolutely.
on the ground
Thank you for pointing
doing the
that
work. Yeah, I mean, you were talking about it a little bit there, but I just wanted to say that too. And one final thing before we close out, I want to say that it's so important that we continue to make a change and move towards change. And I had someone bring to my attention something a couple of weeks ago that I thought was phenomenal. And we posted it on the NAACP website. And for the first time in the history of Harford County, there are 5 Black women in elected positions.
And that's how we make
I'm gonna
change
say their
happen.
names. Denise Perry, who's on the Board of Education, and she's represents District A. Carol Bruce on the Board of Education, representing District E. Tandra Ridgely, Aberdeen City Council. Nalanda Robert, County Council District A. First time in history we've had a woman of color.
District A is
And
killing
then,
it.
yeah. And then me on the Havre City Council. So we can do this. We can continue to make change and grow. And we've been doing, think about all the stuff since we met each other, and how we met each other, and how we got this group together. So
how far we've come
through.
we will be back, same place and time next month.
Oh, we didn't say where we are. We are at the State Theater of Havre Grace. Thank you to Katie and Jared.
And check out their events.
Yes.
Yes, they host amazing drag brunch, wrestling,
Concerts, all sorts of events. It's a
Comedy
great
shows.
community resource.
Yes.
So thank you to the State Theater.
Yes.
Thank you, State
And
Theater.
all of these women, and thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe and resist.
Bye.
Yes.
Deny, defend,
Keep the faith.